Interesting. Thank you very much again. Hey everyone, and welcome to this live session on YouTube this time. The previous one was on Twitch. My name is François Grassard. I'm one of the co-founder at Left Angle and also the CCO of the company. And today I won't be alone because we will have two pre-recorded sessions and I will be with Sebastián Bugna from Revision Effects. Sebastián is obviously an expert on Revision Effects products, such as ReelSmart Motion Blur on Twixtor or the new ResUp, who is an impressive upscaler. But he's also an expert on Maya and on Arnold, who is a render engine provided with Maya. And he will explain two ways to interact between Maya and Autograph. The first one will be by exporting AOVs, also known as passes, from Arnold, and he will explain how to composite everything, how to merge these different images into one final composition using Autograph. But in the second time, he will also explain how you can export the whole scene using the USD file format. USD is not only about exchanging information. Keep in mind that USD is also a new way to work in 3D because everything is linked. If you have, for instance, a kitchen with a table and a chair, you are creating a stage, that's the name of a scene in the USD terminology, to define link to the object, like to some object like a chair and like a table, and merge them together only by linking information. So it's a new way to have different versions of the same scene really easily, and to also have less space taken on your hard drive because you are not importing anything, you are just linking to external data. We're going to talk about that in the second session. I will be in charge of this one, and I will explain how you can start from Blender and export everything using USD and connect to these USD assets right inside Autograph and do the layout and merge everything into the same stage right inside Autograph, and also do the compositing on the fly at the same time using one application. So thank you very much for being here with us today. We will be present in the chat. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Sebastián and I will be here to answer to your question. So thank you very much. Let's start with the presentation from Sebastián. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, and thank you François. I'm Sebastián from Revision Effects, and in this demo I'm going to show you how to export and composite 3D render passes in Autograph using some of the Revision Effects tools. In the first part of the demo, I'm going to show you how to export and set up the different AOVs like motion vectors, UV map, seed depth, and Cryptomattes using Maya and Arnold. But notice this workflow also applies if you are using other 3D applications such as Cinema 4D or other render engine like V-Ray, for example. Then I'm going to show you how to composite these different AOVs inside of Autograph using Revision Effects plugins, ReelSmart Motion Blur, and Remap. And after that, we are going to talk about a different topic and a different workflow, which is working with USD files. So I'm going to show you how to export USD files from Maya and then import them into Autograph. And finally, I'm going to show you another use case, which is how to import 3D camera track information from thin size inside of Autograph. So let's start. Here's our 3D scene in Maya. As you can see, it's a basic animation that we are going to render in different render passes. If we go to the perspective view, you can see it's just a static model of the Revision Effects logo and this animated camera. On the left in the outliner, we can see the different elements of the scene like the dome light. We also have the model of the logo separated in three objects like the main text, the underline, and also it has a backlight created with an Arnold mesh light. If we open the Arnold render view, we can see how this is looking right now. So we choose the camera We need to refresh it. And there we go. We are now getting a fast preview of our main beauty render. If we open the Arnold render settings, we see that we are rendering in EXR format, the compression is zip, and also we are not checking the merge AOVs option in this case, but in Autograph you can work with a single EXR sequence or separated sequences. And in the Arnold render settings, we are using the default settings. We can always increase that for get a better quality final render. Okay. And under the AOVs tab, on the left, we can select from a list of all the available AOVs that Arnold has, and also we can create custom ones when we need it. So, and on the right side, we have a list of all the active AOVs of the project. So let's start by creating the CDEF AOV. On the Arnold render view, we can get a preview from the CDEF render pass that it's doing right now. Let's create another one. Let's create crypto object pass, which is very useful to create different custom mats based on the objects of the scene, like object IDs, and that have different colors. Now, as you can see, we have a different color for each element of the 3D scene, and we can quickly select directly on the viewport. And okay, and now let's create a custom AOV for the UV render pass. Let's call it UV. We have to, in this case, select a shader. So we are going to search for the AI utility shader under the Arnold shader list. We set UV chords there because we want to UV render pass. It has to be flat, and that's it. We, in the Arnold render view, we can see this is the UV map information of the model. The background has transparency, but the Arnold render view doesn't show that right now. It's RGBA, so that's fine. Then we are going to create the motion vectors also as a custom AOV. Let's call it motion vectors. In this case, we are going to choose another shader, which is the AI motion vector from Arnold. And here we also have to enable in the Arnold render settings, we have to go under the motion blur tab and enable motion blur. And as you can see, it's rendering motion blur on the beauty render, but we don't want that. We want to ignore that. So we go to the feature overrides and check ignore motion. And in this case, we can control the motion blur effect on when we are compositing. So in the preview, we are seeing that it's not doing what we really need. So we need to set the max displays for something like 64 or something bigger, and then we are not seeing clearly the background because of the skydome, but we can hide it. It also has all the transparency information on the XR sequences. As you can see, it's a RGBA sequence, so it has alpha information on it, so that's fine. That's how it should look. And let's unhide again the skydome. Okay, so then we have to do a few more things in order to get accurate results with the motion vectors. We have to enable instantaneous shutter here, and we also have to set a custom shutter start and end values, because they need to match with our motion vectors shader here. And we also would need to make our camera use the global shadow of the scene in order to, as I said, to get accurate results when we are using ReelSmart motion blur when compositing the different AOVs. So basically that's it. We have our different AOVs. Of course, we can create different things. For example, now I'm going to add atmosphere to the scene to make it look nicer. We can also create different AOVs if you need it, or if you want, like ambient occlusion, specular, shadows, and so on. There are plenty of options, but right now we are just using UV, CDEF, crypto object, and motion vectors to make a composition in Autograph. And before we continue, let me show you that in the Revision Effects website, there are a number of tutorials and resources about UV maps for different 3D applications and different render engines, and a lot of information about this specific topic, and also about motion vectors render paths for different 3D applications. So here's the final result after compositing in Autograph, and I'm going to start showing you the final project in Autograph, and then we are going to create it from scratch. So this is our final composition. We have different render passes here, and the idea of this project is starting from this main beauty render pass here in the bottom layer. We are going to change the texture of the logo by this rock texture using the Remap UV plugin from Revision Effects, and we are going to get something like this. And then we are going to add some motion blur effect using ReelSmart motion blur. And finally, we are going to add some depth of field effect using the defocus modifier from Autograph. Okay, so before we start, let's look at the different elements on the 3D render passes or AOVs that we have here. First, we have our main beauty render. Then we have the motion vectors pass. We also have our UV map with the UV map information. We also have the CDEF map here. And the rock texture image. And also we have the crypto object, which is useful, as we said before, to create custom masks based on the 3D objects in the 3D scene. In Autograph, what you need to do to use is in the sequence settings of the crypto object, you have to go to the Cryptomatte tab and enable it. Now we get different colors for the different objects IDs, and we can select them by using this list, or we can use the picker instead to choose from the different objects and add or remove different mats depending on what we need. We are choosing this right now. In the output mode, we have to choose selected mat to use it as an alpha mask. We are going to use it later, okay? So let's start from scratch. In this case, what we are going to do is, from the main beauty render, we are going to create a composition from footage. The first thing that we are going to do is changing the texture of the logo using Remap UV, which needs to be applied on the UV map render pass. So we are going to drop the UV AOV to the composition. And now we are going to apply as a modifier remap UV here from the list. And okay, we get a red add output. So we have to go to the remap UV settings because the texture is not yet connected. So we have to connect the texture, and we choose here from the list rock texture. And now, as you can see, the texture is correctly being applied on the logo, but it's too big, right? So we need to tile the in the X and Y direction like by 10 times. Then it looks much better. And we also want the texture to be applied only on the text, on the main text of the logo. So we are going under the UV map layer and the enable mask and mask. We are going to connect our crypto object that we created before. Now, as you can see, the remap UV result is only applied on our main text based on our Cryptomatte. So now we would like to integrate the result of remap UV with the original beauty render. So we select an appropriate blending mode from the list, and we also adjust the opacity. I think that's fine. Yeah. Then we want to add some motion blur effect using the motion vectors information from our motion vectors path. So for that we want the motion blur to be applied on top of the remap UV effect. So we create a new adjustment layer. Let's rename it and call it ReelSmart motion blur. And now we are going to apply a new modifier and choose from the modifiers list ReelSmart motion blur pro vectors. In this case, we get a red output, but that's because we still need to connect the motion vectors input. So we choose it from the list. So that's it. Now we are getting motion blur effect based on the motion vectors information from Arnold AOV. I think it's too high, so we are going to decrease it a bit. That looks fine. Okay, and finally we are going to add some depth of field effect to the composition. So we create another adjustment layer. Let's rename it for CDef. We apply a new modifier, and we are going to choose the focus here. We need to first, of course, connect the diff map CDef. We are also going to disable the highlights boost. It's too strong, so we are going to decrease the defocus main value here. I think that looks much better. Yeah, that's it. As you can see, we have replaced the texture of the logo, and we also added this motion blur effect that makes the animation feel more smooth and organic, and we did that with no need or having to go to the 3D application and re-render all the 3D sequences again, which is slow. So that's one of the main advantages of this workflow, to have these tools when you are compositing 3D renders. Okay, so now let me show you a very similar project, but that was created with a completely different workflow. This project, I'm not going to show you all of the details, But this project was created using a USD file instead of rendering all the 3D render passes and AOVs in a different 3D software. So this animation was entirely made inside of Autograph. Here is our main composition with ReelSmart motion blur. The main composition is this one, so let's take a look inside of it. We have 3 different cameras, we have the glow effect there, we have light, we have this 3D scene that has the USD file inside of it. There are other tutorials about how to use USD files in Autograph and also a very complete demo about that. So I'm not going to explain all the details, but here we are switching between the 3D and the 2D view. So this is just to show you how you can achieve similar results using completely different workflows. And my idea is to show you how to export the USD files from Maya and then import into Autograph, and then François is going to do the same with Blender. In Maya, here's our scene that we were working with before. If we go to the perspective view, if we want to export, for example, the Revision Effects logo and the animated camera to Autograph, we just have to select the elements in the scene. We go to File, Export, Selection. We choose from file type, list the USD export option. We also have an option for referenced USD that we are not using here. This is the most important option that we have to check here. We have to create a USD parent scope in order to import it correctly in Autograph. We need a root parent primitive so Autograph can read correctly the USD file. And we are also going to enable the animation data, and the frame rate is okay. So we just export, we set a name, and then back to Autograph. We are going to create a new project. First, we are going to import the 3D assets, the Revision Effects logo that we just exported. Then we are going to create a 3D scene. There we import the USD file. And there, as you can see, now we have the Revision Effects logo with the... We don't see anything, we need to create a like before. But there we go, that the camera is animated there, so we can see through the selected camera the same animation that we had in Maya. Then we would have to start working with the shaders here and the animation and the composition and so on. I'm not going to create all the composition here, but this was just so you can see how to start working with this alternative workflow. In the 3D scene, we can start editing the different primitives from the USD files. We can start creating shaders, like new cameras or whatever you need. And then we can also create a camera inside of the composition and import the USD camera information. Okay, if you go to the home and under the asset section, you will find another very similar example to this one I'm showing to you, which is the 3D left angle logo made based on a USD object and modifying the shaders and lighting and animating the cameras to get this result. you can download the project if you want to check all the details about a project like this one. So finally, I want to show you another use case of this workflow using USD, which is importing 3D camera tracked information. This example was provided by Andrew Hasselden, and we have this shoreline sequence that we are going to create a composition with that, and Andrew sent us 3D track points exported in thin size, so we are going to import that into Autograph, create a 3D scene, import the USD into the 3D scene. There we have a camera trackers, and two guys there. We just have to disable the camera screen from synthesize in order to see it correctly, and then we have to create a camera and import the camera information from the USD file. And there we go, we have the 3D track points information from thin size imported into Autograph thanks to USD format. So that's it. François is going to continue the demo talking about the workflow between Blender and Autograph, but so far we have exported different AOVs using Maya and Arnold and created a composition with that in Autograph using some of the revision effects tools. We also were able to export USD scene from Maya inside of Autograph and also import 3D camera track information from thin size inside of Autograph. So I hope you find this interesting for your own workflows, and if you have any question, let us know, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for this really interesting presentation. And we are back live just a few seconds before launching my pre-recorded presentation. Just to precise just a little thing, I previously said that USD was all about connecting instead of importing. But in my presentation, I made a mistake because I'm sometimes still using the term import. So just to be clear, when you hear the word import, it's actually connect instead, okay? You are exporting something from Blender and you are connecting to the USD assets in Autograph. Even for me, who is working with USD every day from several months now, it's sometimes difficult, to make the switch and think differently and replace the term importing by connecting. So it was just to precise this little thing before launching my presentation. So here we go, and we're gonna talk about that just after the show. If you have any question, once again, feel free to ask. We will be there to answer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sebastian, for this great presentation. And as you said, you have two ways to work with DCCs and Autograph at the same time, by rendering passes using, for example, Arnold in your case, or by exporting the whole scene in USD and render. Thank you very much, Sebastian, for this great presentation. And as you said, you have two ways to work with DCCs and Autograph at the same time, by rendering passes using, for example, Arnold in your case, or by exporting the whole scene in USD and render everything on the fly in Autograph. And because you talk about 3D tracking, I also did some tests here using a really crappy tracking, completely made automatically using a mesh room here to simply recreate the movement of the camera and also generate a point cloud and a mesh who will be integrated in Autograph in a few minutes. But just before that, we are going to just summarize how to export information from Blender to Autograph. And at the end of this presentation, I will show you how we can integrate this kind of thing. So like the bouncing ball, the chrome bouncing ball in the road, on the road here, and also this drone here with flying in the front of the camera and follow the car with a little bit of grading and also some defocus and light wrap and something like that. As you can see here, this is a pretty simple 3D object directly rendered in Autograph using Filament. Filament is the real-time render engine provided with Autograph. And we are going to show some pretty simple steps to integrate this kind of thing in Autograph and render everything on the fly. Just before that, we're going to talk about how we can work with USD between Blender and Autograph, how to export information using USD. And the most important about USD when you want to work with USD in Blender is to use a special build of Blender made by NVIDIA, because just in comparison, this is what happened with the official Blender release. Here I have the 3.5.0 with the latest Blender release available. And when you go to File, Export, Universal Scene Description, you can see you have this option on the right of the export window. But if I do exactly the same thing now in this special build made by NVIDIA to work with USD, I go to File, Export, and Universal Scene Description, and as you can see, I have a bunch of additional options to export a bunch of things, such as the texture, the animation, skin characters, also the environment, also convert unit and convert orientation. We are going to talk about that right now. But just to be clear, if you want to work with USD in Blender and want to export information from Blender to Autograph, you have to rely on this really specific build which is available on the Blender website. You just have to go to Download and then go to Build. And in the Build section, you have all the official builds available here, but you have also a branch section when you can get some variation of the initial Blender code with some additional feature. And this is the case here with the Blender 4.0 and Universal Scene Description. It's a build made by NVIDIA. Once again, they made this build to work mainly with Omniverse, but it's also really useful to use this build to export information to Autograph. So we're gonna see how to export this pretty simple scene with Autograph Shadable made to test some shader using Filament in the software. And here I'm going to go to File and Export Universal Scene Description. So first you have the option to base the visibility of your object based on viewport or render. The main difference between the two is just relying on this icon or this icon. Here is the viewport visibility and here is the render visibility. So depending on the option you are going to choose here, you are going to rely on this icon or this icon regarding the visibility. Here I'm going to just stick to viewport. So really important here, Blender is working in a coordinate system with Z up, the Z axis pointing to the sky. But in Autograph, exactly the same concept as in Maya or in 3ds Max, we are working the Y up, the Y axis pointing to the sky. So we have to do a conversion of the orientation of the coordinate system between Blender and Autograph. So that's the reason why we have to check this option, convert orientation, to convert the whole coordinate system to Y pointing to the sky. So we also have to check the convert to centimeters, because by default a Blender unit is 1 meter, and the USD convention about the unit is to work with 1 unit equal 1 centimeter. So that's the reason we have to convert our unit to don't have a really big scene. And that's also important to talk about that, because in this case my shadowball is way too big to be used in Autograph, and we are going to see the mistakes is gonna happen in Autograph because my scene is pretty big. You are going also to check the relative path. It's pretty important when you want to export texture. use in the USD file on your object, because you are going to recreate texture and rewrite the path to this relative file. I'm not going to go through each option because some of them are really specific and really technical, but this one is important: match, transform, and shape. In a lot of 3D software, you have two nodes from one object, one for the transformation and one for the object itself. In Maya, for instance, you have the transform for the positioning of the object and also the shape of the object. And it's exactly the same concept in Blender. When you have a ball, for instance, you have this option here, these properties here, to define exactly where is it, and you have this second option to define what is it. So the transform is here and the shape itself is defined in this section. But if you want to export animated object, and more especially animated camera, you have to don't check this this option, because your camera won't be animated at all if you check this option. So leave this by default. And if you want to just export object, non-moving object, such as a chair or a table or maybe a logo, we are going to talk about how to create a logo for basketball show. You can check this option because you want to animate your object in Autograph and not retain a previously made animation in Blender. So be really careful with this option because it can break all your animation. Really important, the stage. The stage is the name used by USD to define a scene. And when you export all your objects in this scene, you are going to parent everything to a root. And here you can see that by default, in the last version of the USD exporter from NVIDIA, you don't have a root specified here defining where you are going to store the materials. And that's a mistake if you want to export something to Autograph, because Autograph won't be able to retrieve your material because you won't attach this material or parent this material to the root. So you have to type /root here to parent all your material to the root node. And because Autograph is going to inspect this root node to find the material, you have to add this root information at the beginning of the path. If you don't add this root path, material won't be retrieved in Autograph, and no texture won't be available. So that's really important to do this here. So export type, it's a type of geometry or object or assets you want to export, such as the transform, the mesh, the material, the light, the camera, and the curves. Here at geometry, you have the option to apply subdivision before exporting your scene. That's important here to do that when you want to export Autograph. You have also the ability to export vertex color, vertex group, normals, that's really important. UV map, we sometimes call ST map in the USD terminology. So you will probably find this ST term instead of UV from time to time in some stages. And here you have convert UV to ST. That's the reason you have to do this. So USD will be able to find your UV map because everything will be renamed from UV to ST. And you can also triangulate the mesh. It's not mandatory, but sometimes it's better to do that. You can also obviously do this in Blender before exporting everything. I'm going to show you some scene who use quads. So using quad and also using n-gon is completely allowed. But if you want to triangulate your mesh, you can do this by selecting this option. Material. The exporter has the ability to convert all material to something called USD preview surface. The USD preview surface is the most basic shader available in USD. It's a PBR shader, physically based rendering shader, using a diffuse, or maybe called albedo, and a normal map, a roughness map, and a metallic map. The export cycle shader is a really specific option where all parameters of the shaders handled by cycles will be stored into custom data. So If your host, where you are going to load the USD assets, have cycles available as a render engine, you will be able to read this information, but it's completely useless if you don't use cycles as a final render engine. And you have also the ability to export textures. That's really important here. Regarding the light, you have the ability to convert the world material. The world material here is simply the image used as an IBL. So I'm just going to show you the texture used here as an environment map. Here I can switch to render, and as you can see, this map is surrounding the scene and is used to light the scene. So by checking this option, you are going to simply convert world material with this image and use it as an environment light used in your USD file. The OpenEXR or HDR file used for this environment will be exported and stored into a separate file. Rigging is pretty important when you want to export animated characters using Armature. We are going to talk about that later in this presentation. Animation is really important if you want to export an animated sequence in your USD file. You can define the first frame and the last frame of your animation, and also the frame step if you want to skip one frame or two or something. Just before exporting this shadow ball, I just want to show you that Autograph is able to use cache files, such as here this fluid simulation computed in Blender. And the cache file is stored as a USD file cache, and USD is also able to connect to Alembic cache. So if you import your Alembic in Blender and export a USD file using this cache, you will be able to use this huge file right inside Autograph. So let's get back to our shadow ball and see how we can quickly export this. So here I have my initial Blender scene, and here I'm going to just delete what is currently present into this USD folder. So I'm gonna enter the USD folder and just say I want to convert the orientation because I want to work in Y up in Autograph. And now I just want to add root to define a root for all the materials. So Autograph will be able to find any material defined in the scene. And I'm also going to convert all my shader to USD previous surface, and I also want to export my texture. Regarding the lighting, I want to convert the wall material, the texture who currently light the scene, and that should be enough for a first export to USD format. So now, as you can see, I have a USD file. You have different kinds of USD file, USD and USDC, who are binary file, most of the time lighter than ASCII file and also quicker to load. But you have also USDA, who is an ASCII file, a text file, when you can manually edit using a text editor all parameters of your scene. And you have also, we mentioned it before, USDZ, who have the format created for the ARKit standard made by Apple. So now I can get back in Autograph and simply load this USD file. So I drop it into my project panel and I double click it, and directly the 3D viewer is showing the content of this asset. For now, I don't have the ability to edit the content of this asset because I only looking at the asset itself and not what is existing inside this asset. But if I just want to maybe create a render on this thing, I can just create a new composition and drop this asset. And as Sebastian did previously, I can also create a camera and just copy the position of the camera here in this composition. So now I can switch to 3D, for instance, and just see through the camera, the existing camera created in my composition. And now, as you can see, the camera has a pivot point who is not well defined to turn around the shadow ball. So that's the reason I'm going to simply look through the camera and maybe just reset the position of the camera and play with the anchor point to just add an offset. And here you can see that I'm working with a pretty big scene. And that's something really annoying because I'm going to put a really huge value into my scene to maybe move this camera before turning around here the scene, as you can see, by resetting the position of the camera and playing with the anchor point. I can easily define a pivot point placed exactly at the same position as the shadow ball. So now I can easily create a turnaround like this. And just before doing this, I'm going to just inspect what's available as post processes in Filament. Remember, Filament is the real-time render engine provided with Autograph, and we have different kind of options such as the ambient occlusion. But once again, you can see the ambient occlusion is defined with a radius based on the unit handled by Autograph. So if I want to maybe raise the radius, I have to change this value. I also want to maybe change the intensity to see the effect of this ambient occlusion a little bit better. And it's gonna even be more visible if I want to activate the screen space reflection, because by default, the max distance is 3 units. And if I want to catch more reflection, I just have to write this value, for instance, here to 1000. So here I can see some reflection regarding the ground. So here you can see I still see the IBL, and now here I now catch reflection coming from the ground using the screen space reflection. So I can turn my camera around like this one to see nice reflection moving along the metallic surface. If I switch back to 3D, I can see this reflection more easily like this one. If I move like this one, you can see some reflection coming from the ground using the screen space reflection in this surface. Now, instead of using directly my asset, I can create a scene and link this asset to the scene. So now I have a full access to the whole element, the whole object, the whole light, material, camera available in the scene. And I can, for instance, turn off the light, who was the image used to light your scene, the IBL coming from Blender. And I could get a new environment like this one, get back to the scene. And instead of using directly the original asset, I'm going to use the filter scene. So I'm going to connect to this layer, this scene instead. So now everything is dark because I don't have any light in the scene. So now I'm able to create a new light, switch this light to dome light, and connect this new environmental image to this environment light, to this dome light. By default, the rendering is done on adaptive resolution, as you can see here, because my zoom factor is under 50% and my adaptive resolution here is set to auto. As you can see, the render is not so good as if I switch to 1:1. So now I can play with the camera and you can see the reflection here on the metallic part, and you can also see the ambient occlusion. But I can do more. I can get back in the scene and simply unfold all the material available. And as you can see, I have my material named UV test who contains a grid. So I click on edit primitive, and here a new scene texture is created, and the PNG used by the USD file is now accessible. You can change it, you can replace the texture, you can also add 2D effect on this element just by adding here a modifier on this grid. So you can change the color, you can add a blur, you can add any 2D effect available in Autograph, but you can also disconnect this texture. And so now you can simply set a new solid color to change the parameters here. You can also maybe improve the metallic aspect of the shader. So I'm just going to make it a little bit more dark like this one. And I can also reduce the roughness of the material. So now you can see we have, I'm going to go to 0, but maybe 115. So now, as you can see, we have nice reflection coming from the IVL, and also for the ground here, coming from the reflection computed by the screen space reflection. So that's where you can simply integrate basic assets in Autograph and work with them. You can simply use the asset itself just by dragging and dropping the object you want, or the group of objects you want packed in this asset just by dragging and dropping it into the timeline. But you can also filter a few things, maybe remove a material, remove a light, move an object. For instance, here I can simply get back to the object available, like this ball here. I can say, okay, I want to override the X form of this ball. So now I have a full access to the position of this element. I'm just going to add a transparent background to make this sphere more visible. And now I can simply change, as you can see, the scale of the ball. And I'm going to just starting from a scale from 0 and just add modifier such as the animator. So now I'm going to work with this animator here and say I want to go from 0 to 1 in 1 second using the elastic interpolation. So now this value here is going to progressively be animated. I was in the wrong timeline because currently I'm taking a look to the scene and not at the composition. So that's the reason I have to rely on this timeline. So you can see now I have an animated ball like this one. So I edit the original transform of the ball contained in the USD assets. And now if I get back to this scene, as you can see, I have an animated ball computed in real time. And once again, I can switch back to auto to have a more fast, more reactive interface here. And I can also obviously create a keyframe and animate here my camera around. So the USD asset here was just the basis of the creative process. We don't want to replace Blender or Maya regarding the sculpting, the modeling, the UV editing. So the goal is just to work with them the best as we can, to create and model and to unfold UVs and to do all the texturing process and the modeling process in a software who can do this really, really good. And then you can export this asset and send it to Autograph. Obviously, in this case, the ball and the basement and the ground are in only one asset, but you can also simply export the sphere using selection only, and you will have more and more USD file who can be combined in Autograph just by dragging and dropping these different elements here. The goal of USD is not to have an exchange interface format, but a new way to combine elements together. And because Autograph is completely based on USD, you have the ability to connect to external assets. The difference between connect and import is really important because in Autograph, we do not import anything. We connect to USD assets. So if any kind of change is made in the original file, in the original USD file, this change will be reflected in Autograph right away. So you can import additional assets and just drop them into the same composition to merge everything together into the same scene. For instance, here, I'm going to simply duplicate my ball to have exactly the same scene twice in the same composition, in the same stage. And I can also obviously add some time offset like this one, and can also play with the retiming feature when I can say, okay, I want this animation, but I want to slow down by a factor of 2. So now, as you can see, the bouncing effects, bouncing movement of the ball is twice as slow. So that was a pretty basic example to really understand how you can export and play with USD asset exported from Blender. But we're going to talk about a more complex scene, such as, for instance, this scene I made for a basketball project previously. So not so complicated, just a logo here and some text, some 3D text, extruded text here, and just a few objects, really pretty basic objects with just a few quads here, just to have a room to play with in Autograph. And really important here, we have this material used by all this polygon here, who will be used to integrate a composition created on the fly in Autograph and projected on this screen using the UV coordinates on these polygons. So we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. I'm not going to redo once again the export process because it's going to be exactly the same thing with almost the same option. But I just want to show you that I previously created a filter scene just with the background and not the logo and not the title, the text in 3D. And this is going to be pretty handy to work with this thing because as you can see in this project, I'm going to load it right now. We gonna work with different USD assets and we're gonna merge all the USD assets in the same scene right inside Autograph. For instance, if I double click the logo, you can see that I previously exported only the logo in this USDC file, but I also the title who has been exported separately. Here I have the Autograph basketball set available here. I'm gonna just simply change the focal to have a better overview of the stage here. Okay, and at the end, I just have this 3D rendering here composition when I drop the set, the title, the logo, some light, and the camera. And now I have full access to any object, any asset integrated into this composition, such as, for instance, the position of the title, so I can move it right away. And as you can see, the screen space reflection is pretty interesting here because I get the reflection of the content of the scene. And most important, I'm just going to hide this part here. These two elements here on the screen are compositions created right inside Autograph. The bottom screen use this composition here. As you can see, I just have a JPEG picture and some noise and some mosaic effect and some grid effect. So here I can only use this texture if I want. So I can simply hide everything and get back to the final composition. And as you can see, this image, who can be maybe an highlight of the game from yesterday or something like that, can be reflected on the ground. And that's something that is really difficult to achieve when you would use render passes, because the reflection have to be dynamic. If you want to change the content of the screen, you have to be able to change it right away and render it right away, right inside the same application. So that's an example where using the USD workflow is pretty interesting if you want to compare with the passes workflow, because here I am able to, for instance, maybe lock this viewer to the final rendering, get back to the bottom screen, and maybe add a circle here. And because I am currently focused on this composition here, I have overlays with computed regarding the position of this element in this composition. So as you can see here, I am able to simply move this element here, and I am currently moving this circle in the bottom screen composition like this one. But if I get back to the final composition, the overlay of this element is still available here. So you can see exactly where you are going to move this circle here in the composition. So exactly the same thing for the bottom screen. If I get back to the bottom screen and just inspect the content of the text, I can simply change the content of the screen here pretty easily. So now just pretty quickly, I don't want to do obviously the whole process right now because it's going to take too long, but I just want to show you how you can quickly combine different USD assets on the same scene. So I'm just going to create a new composition and drop the AB set with the Autograph basketball set in scene. And now, as you can see, I have no light, obviously, because no IBL is present in the original set. When I exported the scene, I unchecked the convert world material in the Blender exporter. And I just want to place my camera inside, but just before, obviously, I need to add a light. So I'm gonna switch to dome light and just use the environment image as a light source. So get back to the environment light. I'm gonna drop this environment light here, and now everything is obviously more clear and more visible. Just want to change a little bit the focal of this camera. As you can see here, the IBL, the light, is represented here by this icon, and you can simply turn it to maybe create some nice light effect. And at the same time, I want to drop the logo. The logo is visible here on the left right now, and also drop the title at the same place. So now I'm just going to push this on the right. Okay, so I'm not going to animate everything, but I just want to show you that it's pretty simple now to animate the light and create this light effect, and also to edit some parameters. For instance, I want to have a full access to the two screens who are visible behind. So instead of using the wall set, I'm just going to create a new scene and link this abset.usdc to this element. So now I get back to the composition, not the final composition, but the composition, and I want to get back in 3D mode, and I'm gonna switch the content of this layer by the content of the scene. Okay, so obviously for now, nothing is visible, but the main difference is now I have a full access to all the hierarchy of the scene, the materials, the object, the camera, everything. So now I can go through the hierarchy and just access, for example, the screen top and screen bottom. I'm going to select the material and want to override everything. And as you can see, the color is not different. I can switch to none. Instead of material, none is not going to be affected by any light, so that's pretty handy in this case. And I can do exactly the same thing for the bottom screen. Once again, I'm going to switch the shading mode to none. Now, here I have the base color element, and the only thing I have to say is I want to use this previously made composition as a texture, and it's done. And I can do exactly the same thing for the upper screen, obviously. So now I just want to place my camera like so, and maybe create a new camera who is now available, as you can see in the timeline. So now I switch back to 2D, and now I can simply turn off some fancy effects, such as the ambient occlusion, so I can raise a bit the radius and maybe the intensity to make it more visible. And I can also turn off the screen space reflection. So that's the best part here. You can see that you have all the reflection, including the screen in the background, which is now reflecting in the ground. I can maybe just change the value of the max distance to catch more reflection. And now everything is reflected in the ground. And I can obviously move my camera and do the whole animation like so. So that was a pretty quick example of how you can create this kind of element just by creating individual assets in Blender and import them and combine them right inside Autograph, and add a better little bit of touch, you know, by using composition as texture and also using some fancy glow effect like this one. So directly render inside Autograph with obviously the possibility to have dynamic content such as the name of the team and the content of the screen in the back. Just let's talk quickly about how you can export animated characters such as this one. As you can see here, I have an amateur who is driving my character. I'm just going to go through the animation like that. And this animation has been exported using exactly the same option regarding the USD option available in Blender, but the only difference is I check the amateur. If you don't check the amateur option, everything will be exporting using a cache. So instead of exporting the geometry only one time and then sending information regarding the movement of each bones in the skeleton, each image will be a different object, like the object I mentioned previously about the fluid animation. So it's going to be heavier on your hard drive. And if you want to make some adjustment regarding the position of each bones, because you can change the rotation and the animation of each bones right inside Autograph, you won't be able to do this because you won't have any useful skeleton at all if you don't check this option. So let's finish just with the 3D tracking shots I mentioned earlier. Just for fun, I try to track this shot using this time Mushroom, who is not primarily made to do 3D tracking, but now they have a new camera tracking pipeline. It's pretty slow, we have to admit it, but it can be sometimes interesting, and the tracking is not perfect. I just want to be clear before showing a few things about that. I worked previously a long time ago as a match moving artist, and let's admit it, this 3D tracking is pretty shitty, obviously, but it can be pretty handy, you know, to just have the structure from motion who recreate the position of the camera for each images, and also the point cloud, and finally creating, using the photogrammetry, just approximative mesh of the mountain in the shot. So after combining the Alembic animated camera coming from Mushroom in Blender, and also integrating the OBJ object exporting from Mushroom and integrated in Blender too, I simply go to Export and Universal Scene Description and check exactly the same option. I want to convert the rotation. I want to add the root parameters here for the material. Oh, sorry, it was in capital, but it's really important. Actually, I was able to say we don't care, but we care a lot, because you have to be really precise about that, because the case, all the values are case sensitive. Okay, so we want to export everything. We want to export the animation. Obviously, that's really important here, because instead we're gonna have only the first frame of the animation. And the material want to export maybe the environment light, and that's it. Okay, regarding the light here, and this is the result in Autograph. So just going to load the final scene, and just to show you how everything is combined. Nothing new from what I previously shown. It's exactly the same concept. So all the USD scene are currently reconnected, not imported, but reconnected. Remember, that's the reason it can take a little bit of time when you reload the scene, because we are reconnecting to the USD and check everything is okay. So here I have the initial shot. Oh, sorry, I just locked my element, my viewer, and this is the initial shot, okay, with the car here. And in parallel, I have just imported a drone model who is available here. So once again, no light is available in the USD assets, because I want to recreate the light right inside the composition. And just recreate a scene using a ball here, once again without any light, but with a really shiny and reflective material, with a really low roughness and really high metallic factor. And obviously, I also imported the mountain itself, who is available here. So once again, you can see that nothing is visible for now, because this USD asset has been exported without any light and without environmental light. But I can create a new asset here and simply drop my mountain. So now if I switch back to 3D, I just need more room for this. If I switch back to 3D and just inspect this scene, I can see the mountain here. So I want to create a new camera, and the camera is available into the scene. So I'm just going to import my camera here, and now you can see this moving camera along the road. So I get back to 2D right now, and you can see something is moving like that. I also imported this HDRI image, which is pretty similar to the light who was available during the original shot, you know, the desert, the blue sky, and the sun here. And now I can get back to my composition and create a new light here, switch my light to dome light. And now I can simply take this HDR image to use it to light. Obviously, you have to adjust the intensity of the light to match the original shot like this one. But as you can see now, I have exactly the same footage here. I can take the original shot and just put it over like this one, okay, or maybe just below, so I can see the car through the whole of the mountain, because the reconstruction using photogrammetry was not so perfect. But that's interesting here to see that something happened under the mountain. So, and using exactly the same concept as previously, using a ball and using screen space reflection like this one, I add this little ball here, as you can see, with bumping just before the car arrived and bounce on the road like so. And this animation is done directly in Autograph, because if I get back to my 3D rendering ball, I have my ball available here because it's a scene, and I can just inspect the keyframe who is created here to make the ball bouncing. So if I switch to the curve editor, I can simply maybe go back in the animation, or maybe place my ball here, and I can go through the ground because I create a mask using the geometry of the mountain to cut the ball here. And I can also obviously retime the ball like this one, so I can make the ball bouncing faster. And just for fun, I finished to add this drone in the front of the shot by creating once again a new composition here, containing only the drone. So it is, okay, using exactly the same camera. So I just create a new camera. I say I want to get the keyframe who are available in the original shot, in the original asset, this one here with the car and with the mountain and the camera. And as you can see, I just add a few keyframes here, position and rotation, just to animate the drone. And because we are in a full compositing system in 32 bits, linear, really precise compositing system, we are able to simply add post-process and add a bunch of effects on this shot. Here, I add, for instance, a few grade to just equalize the light between the 3D rendering and the background. And I also add a light wrap around the propeller here, and also add defocus, animated defocus here to have this kind of shot and match the color of the background and match the movement and match the defocus. And so that's the result. So we have the ability to work with USD assets to merge everything in a huge stage and render everything on the fly and composite the whole scene together. So I hope you find this presentation interesting. Thank you very much once again to Sebastian from Revision FX from all the information we gave us about exporting EXR passes from Arnold and using them in Autograph, and also how to use USD structure, USD scene, USD asset exporting from Maya. So I hope you found this interesting also regarding the Blender process and the Blender workflow, Blender to Autograph. As you can see, we can do a lot of things, and we can merge everything in the same stage right inside the Autograph, do the rendering and do the compositing on the fly. So, and we are back live. Thank you very much for being here. I hope you enjoy the two presentations. Thanks again very much to Sebastian for being here with me today. And I hope you have an overview of how you can interact between different DCCs such as Maya or Blender and exchange information between all these DCC and Autograph by using passes, AOVs, using AXR file, and how to combine everything using only 2D image right inside Autograph, or by exporting the whole thing and doing everything live, rendering everything on the fly. As you can see, for different kind of project, you want to choose one approach or the another. If you want to have dynamic reflection on the ground, for instance, when I show a few things about the basketball project, in this case, doing everything in real time can be pretty handy. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comment. If you want to know more about the product, you can go to left-angle.com. You can also obviously check the Revision Effects website to know more about their product, and especially ReelSmart Motion Blur, who was used in the presentation made by Sebastian. And obviously, you can also check our social network and also the YouTube channel, where you're gonna see a bunch of information about 3D. Also, we have a previous live made on Twitch who is available as a replay, and you can see more information about how you can do the 3D part and the 2D part at the same time in only one application, who is named Autograph. Thank you very much for being here, and see you next time in another live session. Thank you. Bye bye.